first recap what we have left last time. So last time we discussed the most popular and widely used authentication mechanism for user authentication. That is password, right? So we know that password it's very easy to use, it's very easy to implement, but it has some limitations because people tend to choose simple and easier to remember password, and that leads to like a conventional attack that's called a dictionary attack. So in a dictionary attack, the attacker will create a dictionary, okay, consisting of all possible common, easy to remember password. And then based on the dictionary, the attacker is trying, the goal of the dictionary attack is to try to figure out which password a target or victim user has chosen, okay? So I mentioned last time there are two types of dictionary attacks. The first one is called online dictionary attack. So here the idea is that the attacker wants to impersonate a target user and wants to guess his password to gain access to a remote server. Okay? So in the online dictionary attack, so the attacker will impersonate users, sends out the username, and then with a guessed password. And then the server will tell the attacker whether the guess is correct or not. Right? If it's correct, if it is not correct, then the attacker can try a different password. Okay? So as I mentioned, online dictionary attack is actually relatively easy to defend against. So how do you defend against online dictionary attack? In practice,
just add a little more data, means so fix the thing with sort, like something you added.
Okay, so here the online dictionary attack is all about guess. So the practical defense against the online dictionary attack is to limit the number of attempts any user can make in a short period of time. For example, if a user enters a wrong password for, let's say, for 3 or 5 times, then his or her account will be locked. And then in order to unlock his or her account, probably he will need to call like a bank to verify additional information. Right? That's the practical defense against the online dictionary attack. And there's another version that's called offline dictionary attack. Okay, so here the idea is that the attacker has already gained access to the password file stored on the server. Okay, so the password file essentially is a list of usernames and password. So in practice, we won't store the password in plain text. Instead, we will normally store the hash of the password. Okay, so now the attacker has a list of usernames and the corresponding hash of the password. Okay, and here the goal for the attacker is to identify the password for some of the users. Okay, so if the attacker just wants to find out the password for one single particular user, then essentially he will use the online dictionary attack to try as many times as he can, right? But in the offline dictionary attack, so here the goal of the attacker is not to figure out one particular user's password. Instead, the attacker wants to figure out the password of some of the users, or as many users as possible. Okay? So what will the attacker do in this case? The attacker will still try one password for a dictionary at a time. He calculates the hash and then compare the hash with all the hash stored in the password file. Right? If there's a one match, then that particular user's password is revealed. Right? Here's the difference. Okay? In the online dictionary attack, the attacker has one target users in mind. In the offline dictionary attack, the attacker just wants to try to recover as many users' passwords as possible. Okay? So here the idea is that if we just store the hash of password, then the attacker just try every password in dictionary to try to figure out whether it's a collision. So this is like a collision. This is like a burst attack, right? To the hash. Okay. So as you can see, so offline dictionary attack is more effective than online dictionary attack in this sense. Okay. So in practice, it's usually very difficult to completely define against offline dictionary attack. So in practice, we will try to make offline dictionary attack as hard, as difficult as possible. Okay, and that's why a common defense is that instead of directly store the hash of the original password, we will append a sorting, okay, to the password, and then we store the hash of the concatenation of the sort and the password. Okay. So in practice, the sort is just a piece of random like string, and the length is fixed, and it's guaranteed that every user will use a different sort. Okay. So by sorting the password, we can make the offline dictionary attack more difficult to succeed in practice. So why is that?
Because there are two unknowns actually. Message and the sort. It's the password and the sort. So even after getting the hash, you don't know if it's just the what part is sort.
So the sort is public. It's stored as a plain text in the password file. Okay? By having each user use like a unique sort, we can increase effort for the offline dictionary attack. Okay? So this is very important. So I hope everybody should be able to understand. So without sort, when the attacker tries one password from dictionary, he can compare the hash with all the hash in the password file. Right? And if we sort password, then the attacker needs to first pick one sort. It's like pick one target user, and then try one password. Okay? So by sorting the password, the attacker cannot try one password and then try to see whether this password compare this password with all the users in the file. Make sense? Okay, that's the reason that we will sort the password in practice. That's the reason. Okay, it's like by sorting the password, the attacker has to pick one target user first and then launch the dictionary attack. Right? He cannot simultaneously launch dictionary attack to all the users. That's the difference. So sorting password is a common practice in reality. For example, in the Unix operating systems, the key to password hash is stored. And so for every user, there's 60 bits of sort associated with each user. Okay, so by doing so, even multiple users choose the same password, their sort hash will be different because each user will have a unique sort. Okay. So there's some general guidelines for users. For example, the initial password should be system generated, and it should look random, and it should have enough strength. And then the initial password should be changed by the user on their first login, and then each user should change their password periodically. Okay. And also, in many practical systems, when we choose our own password, the system will evaluate the strength of the password. And if the password is too easy to guess, and then those weak passwords will be rejected by the system. And different systems will have different requirements, okay, for the password to be accepted. And because different systems have different requirements, that creates another issue. Okay, so in many cases, if we'll have to choose different passwords for different systems. So one password that is accepted by one system may be rejected by a different system. That's a common practice, but it also sacrifices the usability of the password. There are also other like attacks to try to invert password. For example, if the communication between the user's device and server is not encrypted, then the attacker may be able to intercept password by eavesdropping the communication. There are also special malware called Trojan horse. That's a piece of program running on your PC, on your desktop. So they will like intercept and record the password you entered. And we have also discussed the man in the middle of attack. So man in the middle of attack can also work against the simple password system. For example, the attacker can intercept all the communication from a user and then use the information and received from a user to gain access to a remote server. And there are also, more recently, there has also been increasing a number of instances of so-called social attack. That's like send an email, like a phishing email, trying to teach the user to click on a website that is actually a fake website. Okay. And in this case, the user will supply their password. And also, there's more recently, I've read some papers about the so-called like a sphere phishing attack. So in the general phishing attack, the attacker will compose an email that looks legitimate, and then he will send the email to many users at the same time, and in the hope that some users will click on the link and input their usernames and password. Right? That's called phishing attack. And in the sphere phishing attack, that's more advanced, like a targeted attack. So, for example, before compose the phishing email, the attacker may try to get as much information about the victim as possible. For example, he will check his a LinkedIn profile, the Facebook profile, and to see what kind of role he serves in the organization, and which brands that he has, and then he will study. So under this position and role, so what kind of email make the target victim more likely to click on? Okay, so in the sphere phishing attack, usually the attacker targets one particular victim, and then the attacker will study and try to get as much information about the victim as possible, and then he will compose a very personalized email, impersonating, for example, his colleagues, his boss, and then in this way, the victim user will be less cautious. Okay, it's more likely for the victim to click on those emails. So these topics are out of the scope of this course, but as we can see, password attack. So there are many attacks on the password. And then this is the last topic for user authentication. So I think I have discussed briefly about biometrics. the idea of using biometrics for user authentication is that we can always explore and use certain users' physical characteristics to authenticate them. Okay, so every person has many physical characteristics. Okay, for example, we know that our face, okay, our eye, our fingerprint, these are common physical characteristics. But there are also many other physical characteristics. For example, the length of my palm, the length of my arm, okay, my voice, okay, and I would say, okay, I'll give you another interesting example. So the length of my ear is also a physical characteristic, right? So every person has many physical characteristics. But in order for a physical characteristic to be eligible or to be suitable to serve as a biometric, so these physical characteristics need to satisfy certain properties. That's the key. Okay, so the first one is uniquely identified. Okay, so for example, fingerprints are uniquely identified. Different persons have different fingerprints. But in this sense, the length of my palm cannot be a good biometric because different people can have the same palm length. And also, it's very difficult to forge and mimic. It means that these physical characteristics need to contain enough information, very rich information. Okay, for example, the length of my beard, that's just a single quantity. That's very easy to fake and mimic. And also, these physical characteristics need to be highly accurate and does not change over time. Right? For example, the length of my beard will change every day. Okay? And on the other hand, our fingerprint, it will change. Okay? For example, if you gain some weight, your finger gets like thicker. Okay, but it changes slowly, but some key features will not change. Right? I'm not saying that there's no change. It can change, but some key characteristics that we can extract from the fingerprint, they will not change. Okay, so I think in 2016, I attended the NSF proposal review panel about mobile authentication. Okay, and in one of the proposals that we reviewed and discussed, the PI proposed that you use the mouse. So use the mouse dynamics as a biometric for user authentication. So the idea is that different users type the keywords and click on use the mouse differently. Okay, so they conducted some preliminary experiments, and it showed that for a group of 30 participants, they developed a specialized software to collect their the duration of their keystroke and the inter-stroke time, etc. They collect the information about the keyboard stroke and how they click and use their mouse, how they move their mouse. And they show that we can use this mouse and keyboard dynamics to differentiate this 30 participants. But that proposal was declined. So one of the panelists pointed out that even though the PIs have conducted some preliminary study, but there's no evidence to show that those dynamics will not change over time. Okay, that's the problem. So for example, if we measure those dynamics this week, we get some certain physical characteristics. If we do the same next month, the same user may have very different physical dynamics. Yes?
It could be mimicked also, the second point. It's once you have access to the file where the data is stored, these variable values are stored for a particular user. I could train myself to use it that way and come for the test.
It's kind of difficult. It's kind of difficult. Unless even if we record a video on how a user type, how a user use the mouse, it's still very difficult to mimic. Okay, it's very difficult to mimic. Okay, and also, so the first three properties are about security, right? It has to be uniquely identified. It has to be difficult to forge and mimic. It has to be reliable. It does not change over time. So the first three are about security. And also the last three properties are about usability. Okay, about usability. So for example, it should be easy to scan or collect. Okay, so fingerprint authentication has been proposed for a very, very long time. And it came to a reality until iPhone. Right? Before that, collect fingerprint requires specialized hardware. And it is iPhone that makes it very easy and to collect. Okay? And also, as you can imagine, for the face authentication, so it has been used in many high security, military base for a long time, but it has not been mainstream until iPhone X. Okay, so the biometrics has to be easy to scan or collect, and it also needs to be fast to measure and compare. Okay, so it's very easy for us to compare two passwords. We just do like a simple string match. But as you can imagine, even for the same user, same finger, if we collect the fingerprint at a different time, the actual image, the fingerprint image will be different. Will be different. For example, if I place my finger slightly differently, then the fingerprint image will be different. We cannot do a bit by bit or pixel by pixel comparison. Okay, so normally the fingerprint comparison algorithm is to extract the key features from the fingerprint. Okay, so if you look at your fingerprint closely, there's some special points, the intersection, etc. So we compare the identified users based on those special points. Okay. Finally, if we want to use a biometric in practice, it has to be inexpensive to implement. So these 6 are the desired properties of a biometric. So the question here is, which of those are concerns for password? So an ideal biometric or basic authentication should satisfy these 6 properties. And which of these are concerns of password?
It should be uniquely identified.
Yeah, that's what. Yes, yes. Because multiple users can choose the same password. Any other? Second is correct. It's easy to guess, it's easy to forge, and if I guess your password, I can use it. Okay. Okay, so these are the 2. But password is very easy to collect. It's very easy to compare. It's very inexpensive to implement.
Yes.
Okay. So whenever we have a candidate biometric, we always want to do an assessment, whether it's secure, whether it's convenient. Okay, so for any authentication technique, especially user authentication techniques, there are two most important assessments: the security and the usability. Okay, usability. So this is like a partial list of the biometric-based authentication techniques used in practice. So we are pretty familiar with the fingerprint, with face recognition. Right? That's all because of iPhone. And for signature typing style, okay. So in forensic analysis, so we'll use signature, the handwriting for user authentication. And as I just mentioned, the length of a PAM cannot be a good biometric. But just imagine if I take a picture of a PAM. This PAM has much richer information. Okay, so like say if I put my hand on a scanner, you scan an image of my palm, and then the palm itself contains many other informations. Okay, so palm geometry is actually a good biometric. It's actually a good biometric. And also, it's similar to the iris scan, and also all voice recognition. So the voice recognition is a little bit problematic. It's like a replay, like a capture, like a record like an audio of the hacker user. The simple voice recognition attack, the system will be broken. Okay, so a few more points about the voice recognition. So in practice, in voice recognition, so what's the current practice that the system will ask you a question, a different question each time. Okay, and then the user will need to answer the question, and you have to answer the question correctly first, and then the system will also analyze like the frequency domain features, other features of voice, to see whether if you are the same person. It's like two-factor authentication. Okay, whether you give the answer correctly, and whether you are indeed the one based on your voice characteristics. So I think this figure is copied from one of the survey papers. Okay, so in that paper, the authors surveyed a wide range of biometrics. Okay, and then they evaluate the biometrics for a number of properties. For example, the universality, so whether these biometrics can be used for all people in the world. For example, whether it's unique, whether it's permanent, so it means that the biometric does not change over time, whether it is easy to collect, and how is the security performance, and whether people accept this biometric is whether accepted, and whether this biometric can be easily circumvented. Okay, so just a rough idea. So if you're interested, you can check the table in more detail. Okay, so far we have discussed different ways, different techniques for user authentication. One point that you should keep in mind is that every user authentication techniques has its own advantages and limitations. Okay? Okay, so what if we want to design and implement stronger user authentication? What can we do? So what if, given a wide range of user authentications, if I feel that none of them is secure enough, for example, we have a very, very sensitive and highly important application system. We want to have a very, very strong user application. So what can we do in this case?
Combine them together.
Yes, that's great. So that's great. So this is called multi-factor authentication. Okay, multi-factor authentication. So it's not just about like a biometric or physical characteristics. We can always combine multiple authentication techniques at the same time together. So if your user wants to gain access to the systems, he will need to pass all the authentication techniques at the same time. That's the idea. Okay. So there's two primary performance metrics to evaluate any authentication technique. The first one is called true positive. Okay, so here the true positive means that a legitimate user is granted access by the system after authentication. Okay, what does that mean? So if the true positive rate is 100%, it means that every time a legitimate user authenticates himself or herself to the system, the authentication always succeed. Right? That's called like 100% true positive rate. But I think in practice, it's very difficult to achieve that, even for the fingerprint authentication, iPhone. Sometimes, for unknown reasons, the phone will not accept our fingerprint. So we need to input the passcode, right? I think everybody has encountered this case. In some cases, it just fails. Okay, so if we combine two authentication techniques into one, okay, and if the true positive rate of these two systems are TP1 and TP2, then the true positive rates of the combined system is simply the product of two TP1 and TP2. Very easy to understand. Another important metric is called false positive rate. False positive rate. What does false positive mean? It means that an illegitimate user somehow succeeds in authentication, right? So ideally we want the false positive rate to be zero. Okay? Question: is the false positive rate of Face ID 0? No, right?
Because you can have twins.
Yes, you have twins, right? If you have a twin, that's like illegitimate users. You will be able to gain access. So even for Face ID, the false positive rate is not 0. Okay, and then if we combine two authentication techniques together, and the false positive rates of the two systems are FP1 and FP2 respectively, then the false positive rates of the combined system is simply 1 minus the product of 1 minus FP1 and 1 minus FP2. Okay, so how to interpret this equation? So this is so 1 minus FP1 is the probability that illegitimate user is denied access. Okay? And 1 minus FP2 is the probability that the illegitimate user is denied access. If we Okay, let me see. Okay, I think there's a typo here. So if a user needs to, if the user wants to gain access to the system, he must pass to both authentications. Right? He must pass both authentications. The probability that he passed the first authentication is FP1. Right? It's FP1. The probability he passed the first authentication is FP1, right? Illegitimate user. The probability that he passed the second authentication is FP2. Right? So basically, when we combine the system, we need to decide the rule, whether it's an AND rule or an OR rule. Okay, so I think I should make it more clear here. So I think I will update these slides later today. So if we design a system like say AND rule, that means that a user can gain access to the system if he passes both authentication. Right? And in this case, the true positive rate is TP1, TP2. The combined false positive rate is FP1, FP2. Right? If it's an OR rule, what will happen?
Maybe plus.
I think this should be 1 minus 1 minus. Yes, so this is the probability that a legitimate user is denied access. Right? This is the probability that the legitimate user is denied access by the second authentication. And the product is the probability that a legitimate user is denied access by both systems. And the 1 minus this probability is the probability that the user is like gaining access, pass one again, at least one for one system. Right? And for the false negative, I think it should be 1 minus FP1. Right? Okay, I think this is inconsistent. So for the first one, I'll update this signs. I'll update this signs. Okay. Okay. So if we, yes.
We just use the AND, so we combine two of them. The success rate will be low than.
I think this should be made more clear. Okay, so we have to define the rule first, and then analyze this to like a matrix. Okay, if we define the rule first, so both metrics should follow the same rule. Okay, so in practice, if we combine two authentication systems using the AND rule, then as we can see, so this false positive rate will decrease. Right? And this like true positive rate will also decrease. It means that we make this system harder for illegitimate user to access. Right? with a illegitimate user who does not have the correct credential, it makes them more difficult to pass both systems. So by using the AND rule, we make the authentication system more secure. Right? But at the same time, we also reduce the true positive rate, because this is like between 0 and 1. This is between 0 and 1. If we multiply them together, we get a quantity that is smaller than either of them. So it also means that we make the system less usable, because it is more likely that a legitimate user will be denied access. Okay? Okay, so how about the OR system? For the OR system, we make it more easier for the legitimate user to access. Basically, enhance its usability, make it more usable to legitimate user. On the other hand, we also make the system vulnerable to illegitimate users. Because at the same time, illegitimate users, the probability that the illegitimate user will gain access will be higher. Right? Okay. I think these are the last two slides. This is another category that's about authenticating hardware. That's what's about the hardware token. I think this token is a physical device. It's a physical device, and it carries identifying information. There are two types of tokens in reality. One is like a passive token, basically just store the information. It's like our UDID when we enter the parking lot, right? So, does any of you park at the parking lot? Yeah. Okay, you swipe the card, right? That's a hard road, like a passive token. That's like a passive token. Okay, and active tokens instead will have processors, and is able to perform cryptography operations. Okay, so we have many examples in practice, like the cards with stripe. That's the old card. That's old bank card, debit card. That's old with only magnetic stripe. The smart card is a new card. It's a new card. The chip card. That's a new card. And also we have USB storage device. When we plug in USB storage, then we can get access to the system. And there's another topic that I will not discuss it now. Probably next semester when I offer the course on advanced network security. So I'll be discussing RFID security. Okay, RFID tags is also can be viewed as a physical token. There's one like a widely used token. It's called the time synchronized token. I think many companies use this type of token. I think one of the most common brand is the RSA. It's a very small piece of. It looks like a USB flash stick. It has a small screen. Okay, and it has an internal clock. It has a display, and it has a secret key. Okay. So what the token does is that it will calculate the one-way hash of the current type, concatenated with the key. Okay. And he will display the hash on the screen. And the user, and this value will change about like once every minute. And the user will need to read this value and type it, provide it to authenticate to a server. So this is actually similar to the Google authentication app. Okay, so we use the app to replace the physical token. But the idea is very simple. So we need the clock, we need the synchronization, and passwords are by far still the most widely used form of user authentication, even though it has so many problems. So just imagine I attended as a proposal review panel. So we discussed and reviewed like 25 proposals, all about user authentication. Okay, biometric is very promising, and now it's not that expensive. It's very convenient, but right now the main concern of biometrics is the privacy. Because whatever physical characteristics we use for biometric, these physical characteristics stay with us for our entire life. Okay, even a hacker has learned our biometric, you cannot change it. Okay, you cannot change it. So it raises a very serious privacy concern. And finally, so two-factor or even multi-factor authentication is commonly used for high security. And if we want to use that for high security, we have to use the AND rule. Okay? If we want to make it more usable, we will use the OR rule. Okay, so that's it for user authentication. Any questions? Okay, in the next two lectures, so we'll be discussing another topic. That is closer to what we have learned in the first half of the semester. Okay, so the second part, so we'll spend two lectures on this topic. That is authentication protocols. So authentication protocols. This is actually a very interesting topic to explore. Okay, so so this outline. Before talking and discussing any authentication protocol, okay, whenever we talk about the authentication protocol, we want to say whether it is secure or not. And as I mentioned, as I mentioned in the first lecture, at the beginning of this semester, whenever we want to design or propose a solution, security solution, what do we need to do first? We need to have a attacker model. Okay, so what specific attacks we want to defend against? Yes, so some solutions may be secure against some attacks, but insecure against some other attacks. So we have to make it very clear at the very beginning, right? We cannot propose solution and then discuss which attack is secure against which attacks is not. We have to have a very clear goal at the very beginning. Okay, so that's why we'll first discuss the attacks of authentication protocols. There are actually many attacks. Okay, and then we'll discuss some building blocks of our authentication protocols. And then we'll discuss the actual authentication protocols. So today probably we won't have time to discuss the actual protocols. So basically, the protocols can be classified into one-way authentication and mutual authentication, and also mutual authentication with session key establishment. So that will be the topic of the next lecture. Okay. So as we know, secure communication almost always starts with a handshake between two communicating parties. Okay, just like TCP, right? If we want to talk to each other, we have to first establish a TCP connection. So the purpose of this handshake, the purpose is to usually to identify the party we are communicating with. It's first identification, and then the second is authentication, whether we are indeed talk with the one who claims they are. And the third, that's the topic of next lecture. We also want to negotiate a session key, and it will be used to encrypt subsequent communication. Okay, so by doing so, we'll be able to achieve both confidentiality and authenticity. Okay, so that's the common goal. There are lots of authenticating protocols available that have been proposed, that have been implemented and deployed. But by close examination, we will find out that many of them are not secure. So they are secure against many attacks, but they are insecure against some other attacks. Okay? And some of their vulnerabilities and weaknesses are very subtle. So in the next two, I think it's 3 lectures, so we'll see many authentication protocols. The purpose of the discussion is that at the end, you'll be able to identify like security vulnerability of some of the protocols, and you'll be able to understand why the most sophisticated like authenticating protocol is designed in such a way. Okay, the reason. So we'll see. And later on, we'll be able to tell whether a protocol is secure. If it's secure, in what sense? Under what attack model it is secure? That's the purpose. There's no like binary answer whether it's secure or not. We have to have a model. Under this model, it's secure. Okay. So this is the list of attacks that we are going to deal with. Okay. So first of all, the most common attacks involves the messages being transmitted. For example, the attacker can eavesdrop on our communication. The attacker can delete, forge, modify messages. For example, the attacker can intercept a message and then inject its own message, like in the middle attack. Okay. The attacker can also like eavesdrop a message and then replay the message at a later time. That's called replay attack. Also, the attacker can intercept the message from the legitimate users and then send out those messages in a different order. Okay? He can also like compose a message by splicing together the pieces from different messages. He can also delay the message delivery. He intercept the message, he wait for like 1 hour, and then deliver this message. As we can see, even for the message being exchanged, there are so many different types of attacks. Right? And finally, sometimes the attacker is able to compromise the host or even servers. Okay, so we'll see what that implies. Okay, so there are 2 terms that we often encounter when discussing communication protocols. The first one is called a session. So a session is basically an exchange of messages, possibly multiple messages and back and forth, that is protected by a single authentication. Okay, so we can connect this concept with the TCP session. So when we start the TCP session through 3 handshake, and then the 2 parties can exchange many messages until the session is released. So similarly, when talking about authentication, so after initial authentication, 2 parties may exchange many messages. Okay? Until in the end, they inform the other party that no more message. This session is released. Another concept is called channel. A channel is basically a conversation opened between two parties. Okay, it's like a virtual channel. It's like a conceptually channel. It's not like a physical channel. So here the assumption. So for the sessions, we can imagine one possible attack is for the attacker to hijack sessions. Okay, for example, Alice authenticates herself with server, and then the attacker later after authentication, the attacker impersonates Alice to communicate with the server. That's called like a hashing session hijack. And for channel, so here we want to spell discuss the concept of channel. It's because it's possible for the attacker to establish like a open multiple channels to the server. Okay, so we'll see what this implies. Okay. So far we have discussed our attacker model. So what capabilities the attacker has? So what type of attacks the attacker potentially launch? Right? Like say the attacks involving message, the attacks that compromise server. And that's the first step, discuss, like articulate our attacker model. The next step is to spell out our goals. If we want to design authentication protocol, what are the goals that we want to meet? Okay, so commonly there are three goals. The first one is that we want it to be secure against the attacks that we have discussed. Okay, and also we want it to be efficient. We want the protocol to be efficient. By efficient, I mean that we want the protocol that involves minimal number of messages exchanged between two parties for the purpose of authentication. And also, we want to minimize the number of keys required for authentication. Okay? And the third one is actually very important. So we want to minimize the amount of trust that the protocol relies upon. So here, you might find this term trust is a little bit confusing. Okay? So essentially, the trust here means that what are the assumptions we need for our protocol to be secure? Okay, so for example, a very reasonable assumption is that your attacker cannot break any underlying cryptography system. Either it's a symmetric key or public key. So the attacker cannot break the underlying crypto system. That's a very common assumption. Right? So this assumption is widely held. Another assumption, for example, we assume that the attacker can at most intercept 2 messages per minute. These are like very strict assumptions that may not hold in practice. Right? Okay, so we want to minimize the number of assumptions and the strength of each assumption. The fewer assumptions that we have, the more general our protocol will be. Right? Okay, so for example, when we read papers, when we do our research, if we read a paper, very interesting, very novel, and then there's one assumptions. And then if we want to relax this assumption or remove this assumption, probably we'll need a whole new solution. Okay, that's what we do in our daily research. So we read papers, if there's an important problem, if there's a solution, we see how many assumptions the paper makes. And if we are able to relax or remove one important assumption, that will be a huge step forward. Okay, so we have discussed packet models, and our design goals. Right? Let's see some of the most common building blocks. Okay. The first one is called trusted key servers. So we want to design, deploy authentication solution or protocols to allow authentications among a lot of users. Right? Okay, we want to enable authentication for any two users, for example, on UD campus, or enable authentication for any two desktops in UD. Okay. So, many authentication protocols will need the two communicating parties to share a secret key in advance before authentication. But it's easy to see that it's very efficient and sometimes impractical for every pair of users to negotiate the secret key or share the password in advance. So, alternative solution to have pairwise pre-share key is that we can have everybody shares a key and authenticates his or himself to a single trusted intermediary. Okay, a third party. So here we assume that every user is able to authenticate him or herself to one third party server. And then after that, we can design protocols to allow any two users to authenticate each other. Okay. So this idea, I think I've discussed before spring break. So the idea is that we have a key distribution center in the middle, and then every user can establish a shared key with this key distribution server. And then, because there's a trust between every user and the KDC, and then we can design protocols to allow any two users to authenticate each other with the help of the KDC. Okay, thanks. So I think we'll discuss the KDC in more detail later, but here this is a very simple example of using KDC for authentication. So here the assumption is that, so we'll revisit this protocol later, okay? So the assumption is that Alice wants to communicate securely with Bob, but they have never met before. However, Alice has a shared key with, so shared key denoted as KA/KDC, with KDC, and Bob has negotiated a key KB/KDC with KDC. So if they want to authenticate each other, so they can ask for help from KDC. So simply, the Alice can send a request to the KDC, ask KDC to give me a session key so that I can authenticate with Bob. Right? So the KDC can simply generate a random session key, KS. So Alice, the KDC can send this session key KS to Alice, encrypted with their shared key. Okay? And the KDC can also send this session key to Bob, encrypted with KB KDC. Very simple. Okay, after that, Alice and Bob have shared key. And then they can communicate and authenticate with each other using this KS. Right? That's the very simple idea. For internet scale, it's not practical to have just a single KDC. Instead, we'll usually have like a hierarchy of KDC, or we have one KDC to manage one domain. Okay. So to communicate securely with the user in our own domain, we can do the previous protocol, like contacting KDC, ask KDC to issue a shared session key, right? And if we want to talk with the user in other domains, then our own KDC will need to contact the other domain's KDC. And KDC must be able to authenticate with each other. Right? Okay, so we'll revisit this issue. So here's the idea. So if the user A wants to talk to user D in a different domain, and then KDC1 and KDC2 can authenticate with each other, negotiate a shared session key, and then they can distribute this session key to user A and user B. Similar, right? Previously, in the previous example, the KDC, the single KDC, like choose the session key. And in this case, we can have the two KDC to negotiate the session key, and then you distribute the session key to both users. Okay. So we have seen some simple examples for authentication using shared key, either shared key or session key, right? But this is why we put it. Okay, so we have known how to use password for authentication. So here, if two users want to authenticate each other, they need a shared key, but usually users don't memorize the session key or a shared key. They just memorize the password. They just memorize the password. Okay? So, there are two cases. Okay? If we want to use like a session key or shared key for authentication, for example, if we specify this key is like 160 bits, user will not remember this like random string. What we do in practice, there are two ways. So either way, so the user like choose a password, and then will generate a key from password using like a hash function. Right? That's how we convert like a password of any actors into a key of the fixed terms. The first way is to use to generate a key from the password. The other way is to protect the key with the password. It's like the key, the password serves the key. We provide the password, and then we retrieve our key. Okay, so as we can see, the security of the key in practice is still determined by the strength of the password. Okay, so it's still vulnerable to dictionary attack. Whenever user or person, human person is involved, okay, there's a difference. If we have like two machines to authenticate each other, they can generate like a store, like a random string, long keys. Whenever human being is involved, they usually only memorize the password, and any subsequent keys are generated or protected by the password. That's something that we want to keep in mind. Okay. On the other hand, if we want to use the secret key or symmetric key or authentication, then if one user wants to authenticate his or herself to the server, in this case, the server is the verifier. Right? The server is the verifier. And if we want to design authentication protocols using symmetric key encryption or hash function, then the server has to store the same key. Okay? The server has to store the same key. That's shared key. And if the verifier or server needs to store the same key, then compromising the server may compromise user keys or password. Similar to the case in user authentication. Okay. On the other hand, you can also design authentication protocols using public key cryptography. If we use public key cryptography, then the server does not need to store user's private key. The server only needs to know the user's public key to authenticate the user. Okay? So public key-based authentication is secure. It's more secure than symmetric key-based authentication. But public key-based authentication has its own problems, so we'll discuss that later. Okay, so what we have discussed so far? We discussed the use of KDC, the mediator, to realize scalable authentication. Right? We have also discussed the relationship between password and keys. The problem is that whenever a human being is involved, human being won't memorize the key, they will only memorize the password. So how do you turn the password into a key? So if there's a one-to-one mapping or like a direct conversion, then key is also vulnerable to dictionary attack. Last topic today. Okay, so there's as I mentioned in our attack model, the attacker may intercept the message and replay the message. Okay, so this is called replay attack. Replay attack. So this attack is problem because if the original message is authenticated, then the replayed message is also authenticated. Okay? Even though it's even possible that the original message is encrypted. The attacker, even if the attacker does not know the plaintext of the original message, he can still replay the message. If we don't do anything, the replayed message will be accepted by server. Okay? So, to detect the replayed attack, or to detect the replayed message, or to defend against the replay attack, a common practice is to add a nonce to each message. So here, a nonce is basically a non-repeating, unique message identifier. Nonce can be made public. There's no need for us to encrypt nonce, even though we can do that. But the purpose of nonce is just to defend against replay attack. Okay. So there are multiple possible choice for the nonce, including the sequence number, random number, and timestamp. So we'll see a few examples. So it's very easy for us to use sequence number to be nonce. So basically, we just generate like the sequence number. We have a counter, and whenever we send out a message, we use the counter value as the sequence number, as nonce, and then we increase the counter value. So if at the receiver side, if a message with duplicate sequence number is received, then it is rejected. Okay, then it's also rejected. So using the sequence number as nonce, we can defend against replay attack. And the additional benefit is that the sequence number itself provides the order of the message that has been exchanged. That's very intuitive. Okay, so in order to use the sequence number as nonce, a requirement is that both the sender and receiver will need to keep track of the current sequence number. Right? Both the sender and receiver need to store and keep track of the current sequence number. It means that both sender and the receiver need to maintain state about their session. Okay? And it is possible that sender and receiver may lose synchronization. For example, if the attacker makes the receiver reboot, when the system just starts, I have no idea,